Today I'd like to talk a little bit about anger and a little bit about patience. And the holidays are coming up, so maybe it's good timing. Of course, we need to talk about anger and patience all the time. And if we can slow down enough to see what's going on, then perhaps we have a better chance of getting on top of anger. Sometimes people have said to me, well, you've been a Buddhist for a long time. How can you possibly still get angry? Well, it takes a good long while to completely remove anger. But slowly, we get better at applying antidotes and working with it. But it's something that we have to keep calling to mind again and again. People were angry at the time of the Buddha. People are still angry today. It's one of our main afflictions to work with. So one thing that I found helpful is to really think deeply about the definition of anger, at least one of the definitions. I'm not sure where this one comes from, maybe Abbey Kosha. Anger is a hostile attitude focused on any of the three, cannot tolerate it, and wishes to cause harm. So there's a lot happening in that definition. It's a hostile attitude. It's an irritated mind. It's a mind with ill will, an intention to harm. So it's a hostile attitude focused on any of the three. What might those three be? Well, other living beings, suffering in our own mental continuum or our own physical continuum, and also inanimate objects. Probably all of us have had one or more episodes of anger towards a computer or a door that we've stubbed our toe on or something like that. And when we think about sentient beings, then we can even extend that a little further. We get angry with people who harm us, people who have harmed us in the past, people who are harming us now, people who might harm us in the future, people who harm our friends in the past, people who are harming them now, people who might harm them in the future. And as discussing it is, we also get angry with people who help our enemies, who have helped them in the past, who are helping them now, and who might help them in the future. So just thinking about, a hostile attitude focused on any of the three and cannot tolerate it, cannot bear it. So there's impatience right there. That's why patience is one of the main antidotes. And wishes to cause harm or intends to cause harm. The opposite of that would be loving kindness, the wish to bring happiness. So there are several antidotes to anger. One of the interesting things to ask is, where does anger come from? So we could answer that in different ways, but in Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva's text, he answers it this way. He says, this is under the nature of the cause, along with its disadvantages. He says, having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the doing of what I do not wish for, and in the hindering of what I wish for, hatred develops and then destroys me. So he identifies the direct cause as our own mental unhappiness. Isn't that interesting? So we could also say that there's a seed of anger in our mind stream, but what's feeding or fueling that seed to ripen at that moment to become an angry consciousness? It's our own mental unhappiness. And so if you think about it, when we look at the different sufferings, like the 8 sufferings of sentient beings, well, there's birth, aging, sickness, and death, and then getting what we don't want, not getting what we want, being separated from what we like. And so just being samsaric beings, we are conditioned to come in contact with things that we don't want, the unwanted, and also to be separated from what we like or not meet with what we want. So mental unhappiness is a really important thing to identify. And if we can catch it at the beginning when our mind is just starting to get upset, irritated, grumpy, that's not anger yet. Actually, unless there's this wish to harm, intention to harm, it's not yet anger. It's just upsetness or displeasure, or we could even say impatience. So if we can begin to identify that in our mind stream, then we can apply an antidote. And the most beautiful antidote he gives us is verse 10, which we've all heard before. He says, why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? So when that mental unhappiness starts to creep up in our mind, oh, this just isn't right, I don't like the way that person's doing this, I don't like the way that person looks, whatever the case may be, we can ask ourselves, well, why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? Can it be remedied? And if it can't be remedied, why be unhappy? what's the use? I remember one of our teachers said, you know, I noticed a lot of people like tattoos on their arms. If you're going to tattoo anything, tattoo this verse on your arm so that it's always there and available. Okay, so this is, I think, one very good antidote is to try to prevent anger from beginning, from starting at all. Then, secondly, I may have mentioned this before, but I thought to do it once again here, and that is to mention this exercise that Venerable Children gave us at DFF back in the 90s, and that was to ask ourselves, to get a piece of paper. It's important that you actually write it down, because if you just keep it in your head, it's not quite as powerful, it's not quite as effective. But she had us get a piece of paper and make 4 columns out of the piece of paper and ask ourselves, what happens physically when you get angry? And to make an exhaustive list. See, we're proving to ourselves why we don't want to follow anger when it arises in our minds. We're looking directly at the disadvantages that we ourselves experience, both the immediate disadvantages as well as some of the more long-term disadvantages. So what happens physically when we get angry? What happens mentally or emotionally when we get angry? That's the second column. The third column is what happens to our relationships when we get angry? And finally, what happens spiritually when we get angry? And so we have a few minutes, and I'm going to ask the Sravasti Abbey community to help me just come up with a couple of examples for each of these, just to show you how it goes. Okay, so what happens physically when you get angry? Breathing rapidly. Okay, fast breathing. What else? Blood pressure goes up. Heart rate. Tension. Clenched teeth. Dentist bills. What else? Bugging eyes. Red face. Adrenaline. Adrenaline rush. Shaking. Okay, so you see right away, we can make a very extensive list. We could keep going with this. We could fill this whole page just with those physical disadvantages. Okay, what happens mentally or emotionally when you're involved in anger? Restless? What else? Ruminate. And then? Narrowing mind. Yeah, single-pointed. Me, me, me. Self-absorbed. Okay, that's verbally, but we can also put that, we start blaming in our mind, and then we blame verbally. What else? Mentally. Unhappiness.
The ego solidifies.
Loneliness and the ego solidifies. Strong sense of I. Feel threatened. Whoops. Discouraged. Unease, depressed. Okay, so again, see, we could keep going. We all have so much information, and yet we still get angry. So we have to familiarize, right? All right, what happens in your relationships when anger's involved? They end. They end. Okay. What's that? They hit a speed bump?
They shut down for a little.
Okay, so people shut down.
People stay away.
Uh-huh.
People get angry back.
Yeah, feels more anger. Lots of difficulties. What about trust? So it ruins trust. What else? Yeah. Awkward. Trust? Yeah.
Bad reputation.
You get a bad reputation. Becomes that angry person. Yeah. fear us. Okay, and then what happens spiritually? Maybe even more important. What happens spiritually when we indulge in anger?
We stop looking outwards.
Okay. Stop thinking of others?
Yeah. People get karma.
Create negative karma.
Destroys everything.
Nobody cheated.
No karma, buddy.
Stops bodhicitta, or mind of enlightenment. Yeah. No concentration.
No self-compassion.
Mm.
Forget to lose.
Forget Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, huh? Forget our refuge.
Familiarize yourself with the reaction.
Yeah, habit gets stronger.
Can't meditate.
Can't meditate. At least then you have a reason, huh? Okay, so this is just an example, just a short example, right? That was maybe 5 minutes at the most, 3 minutes. But when we have an example like this, and when it's so visual, and then we have that on a piece of paper, and then we read that every morning, and we remind ourselves, this is why I'm not going to indulge in anger. This is why I'm going to do my very best today to stop anger before it gets going. That's going to be easier. And if it does get going, I'm going to do whatever I can to remove myself from a situation until I get my mind back under control. So we have about a month before Christmas, and we'll be seeing relatives, and also the stress of being out in the stores. They're already playing Christmas music in every store we went to yesterday. We're going to meet with the unwanted. We're going to be separated from what we want. So this is one way to get started on looking at anger, putting it into it, and then taking the steps to develop patience. Hope it's helpful.